Well, good morning, all, and welcome to Memorial Day version of the Worship Laboratory for Zoom. I'm glad you all are here. Those of you that we were joking, some of us in the waiting room before, that no big Memorial Day plans. One, it's very early in California, as some of my West Coast folks have reminded me. But it's good to be with you all again. If you are with us for the very first time, we're really excited that you're here. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat room. This group is really very generous in answering any question, no matter how simple, basic you may think it may be. We're all starting at this in some place, as well as feel free to jump in during the conversation times. Today, after I present a little bit about what we do, I want to talk a little about what is next for folks and what folks are thinking about in this next round as some churches are having to make the decisions for various reasons to worship differently or together. I don't know how folks are going to do it, but there may be some next steps for you all, or you may be wanting to add on some technology or some things. So we'll talk about that a little bit. This is recorded, and I will post it. I try to get it done by Tuesday afternoon to put it up on my YouTube channel and share it in the Facebook group. If you're not part of the Facebook group, make sure you get on over to Facebook, and you can just search for Zoom Faith. And you can join there. Somebody could put it in the chat room if you want today. Again, if you talk today, as you know, all the settings are rolling out that I can unmute you, but it'll be a request. You'll have to unmute yourself. That's the new shift that has happened. And then if you've spoken before, you've been here since the beginning, if you would just say your name and your ministry context. All right, as I do every time, we kind of walk through to get us started, kind of prime the pump about what we're doing at First Presbyterian Church. So these are our slides. Again, we open at 9:30 with all of our worship team that comes in together to do a quick run through. We do sound checks at 9:30, 9:55. We open up the waiting room, and our musician begins to play a prelude, and we start recording at this point. So that's when, and folks are seeing this, changing their name. I do a brief welcome. We are paying particular attention to folks who are not from our geographic area. We're getting more and more folks who are not living within our area and never will. And so we're kind of shifting and making sure we intentionally welcome these folks. We are honored to have Reverend Denise Anderson preach this past Sunday. For you Presbyterians, she was the co-moderator of the 222nd General Assembly with Jan Edmiston. Really excellent. So if you are Presbyterian, though I'm sure she would preach for anyone, and you're zooming sermons in, you should go ahead and ask Denise. I do little announcements around our things that we have going on during the week and remind people that really the only way we can communicate folks now is electronically. So folks are going to have to keep up and subscribe and follow and all those kind of things. So we have about 12 people at our church that aren't online. And so those folks get calls and those kind of things. But for the most part, we need folks to connect with us. I just do a few announcements. The big announcement for our congregation is that last week we decided officially that we were not going to hold in-person worship gatherings until 2021. For many folks, that seems like a huge deal. We were kind of like, that's probably the reality. We can always change, but this frees us up to actually do some planning and to kind of settle into this new space, which has been, we're very excited about. So anyway, that was what our big announcement that went out this past week. Some folks thought it was in the direct defiance of what President Trump said, but we had made the decision beforehand. We just simply announced it after he made his declaration about houses of worship. All right. We also, on Friday, we have Liz Theo Harris. I'm doing a webcast with her, a webinar with her, if you're interested in that. Book study, Bible study, Pentecost offering, Presbyterians. That is this coming up Sunday. So hopefully you will give to the Pentecost offering if you can. And then we do our breakout group announcements. I do a little bit of Zoom sharing about, again, just helping to let folks who are first timers know kind of what's happening. We changed a little bit of language here that we've talked about video being optional, that there is, what we're seeing is that not everybody always wants to have their video on. So we want to make sure that we're letting folks know that that is all optional. And I would say we have about 70% of our people use their video and the rest do not. And then we talked about the muting and unmuting today this Sunday, because most of them had been requests to unmute. Now everybody's upgraded, and then we do a 10:20 closing of the meeting. So that's at that point, nobody gets back in, or nobody gets in. And then I just walk through the service real quick, just so folks can be a reminder. We don't send out bulletins or anything like that beforehand. We do a centering time, as we do. We do an opening prayer. We just rotate between some of our pastors.
Bruce?
Yep.
Yeah, quick question. You say 10:20 closing time. The service starts at
10.
At 10. Okay.
Yep.
So you give 20 minutes.
10 o'clock. And people have learned how to arrive late, even online. So we're kind of pushing folks to just make sure that folks get in by 10:20. We've had a couple people that couldn't get in, and we said, well, 10:20 seems generous. So, all right, we keep going. We sing a hymn, and then we do a confession where a liturgist and I just share that from the screen here. I'm the one. Aaron was the many. We do the same thing for our passing of the peace. We have a kind of a liturgy that is tradition here, and then Aaron does that. I do that. And then I switch everybody to gallery view, kind of encourage them to go to gallery view if they're not already. And I redo a big reveal and everybody says hello. So this is the interesting time now. So I can hit unmute all, but all that does is says, hey, if you want to unmute, you can. So I don't get to control the cacophony of voices. So it worked out fine, but it was just a little bit different this time. You'll notice you no longer have that unmute all button on your participant screen.
So Bruce,
yep.
Great question, and I haven't been on.
That's okay. And say your name, where you're serving.
I'm sorry. I'm Ray Began with Fairlington Presbyterian in Alexandria, Virginia.
Great, awesome.
So basically, you're showing the slides, you're screen sharing, and you basically rely on people seeing you in the little box.
Yep.
Or they can bring, okay.
Up to six people. Always remember, folks, when you are sharing your screen, you're still being seen. So just remember that even if you can't see yourself, people have that choice, as you have the choice right now, right? You can either not see my little box, you can see just me, you can see 3, or you can see 6. So just FYI, it's a good thing to remember that people are still watching you. All right, and then we do scripture reading. Scripture happens. Denise preached. She didn't use slides, so Denise, I just took her and revealed back to her and used Spotlight to make sure that everybody would see her. We sang our hymn, and then we had one of our members talk about one of our major we host people who are experiencing homelessness shelter once for a month, and so we just made the decision to figure out how we're going to do that in July. Talked about that. Then we had one of our musicians do special music. Prayers of the people. This was reminders for folks to use the raise hand. We're trying to do that. Encourage folks who are calling in to use the *9 to see if they could raise their hand. Nobody did it, but we're asking to. And then we have one of our tech deacons, Alex, they rotate, so basically says now, rather than I'll unmute you, says I'll request to unmute you, please, and then you have to unmute yourself now. So we're just letting people get used to the new upgrades that are happening and updates, and then people pray. And then after we go to reveal everybody and we do our prayers together, I do a combo closing prayer into communion. So we've adapted the Lord's Prayer. I've been called a heretic a lot this week. I don't know if any of you are following Twitter these days, but we've changed the Lord's Prayer around. So I'm sure that those folks would be grateful to see that we did that too. There's our prayer, and then we go back to communion, and the rest of what we do with communion and everything is all face to face. So and back in screen sharing. So I'm going to stop sharing there. All right. Now, what we do usually is questions, thoughts, reflections from this past week. We just kind of open it up, and then in a little bit we'll have some interaction, and then we'll start. I want to have a conversation about what folks are thinking about next, and how you're going to add, enhance, step back, whatever you're going to do in this next round as we hit the summer of Zoom. All right, questions, thoughts, reactions, sharings from this past week, and I'll give priority to folks who have not talked before if you're new. So you can use the raise hand as well. Would invite you to go ahead and do that. Our two co-hosts, you can just jump in whenever you want because you do not have raise hand ability. So if you have any questions or thoughts, you can go for it. And I don't watch the chat room. So if you have questions specifically for me, either you'll just go ahead and raise your hand and ask them in there, or somebody else in the chat room can or one of the co-hosts can look and see, and you can ask that question for me. All right, so I'm looking for raised hands. Anybody have any questions, thoughts? How did it go this weekend? I did not see any Zoom bombing reporting. Woo!
Hey, Bruce. Jeff Spencer, Niles Discovery Church in Fremont, California, UCC DOC congregation. I just wanted to say that a couple questions about you sharing your slides came up in the chat. And
okay.
In the Facebook group, Bruce puts a post inviting people to share their resources that they used, and we'll bug him right now to make sure
put those up there.
His.
Yep. So there, every Sunday, if you're in that group, because what had started to happen, which is natural, right, is we're all sharing our stuff all over. So every Sunday, there are 2 posts that come out that I try to, I don't do a lot of moderating in that meeting. And fortunately, everybody's been great and well-behaved. And I've only had to kick a few people out or block their stuff. But I put 2 posts on Sunday. One is, how did it go? And just to let us know how things went. So we have that in one thread. And the other thread is share your links, your slides, your live streams, your recordings. And that way we kind of have it all together and people can kind of see what other folks are doing. So thank you, Jeff, for that reminder. All right, Beth Wyman, you are up. I think I just requested for you to unmute yourself.
I did. So I'm Beth Wyman. I'm at Hyde Park Presbyterian Church in Boston. And my question is, as you have extended your time in Zoom, and it sounds like beginning to think about new ways of imagining being a congregation that includes people who are not geographic, I'm wondering what you're doing and how you're moving to help people who come online begin to see themselves as part of your congregation. So we have a lot of people who are like relatives of relatives, and I haven't yet, and they seem primarily to be observing. I mean, they participate in worship, but they're primarily observing. They don't, and so I'm just wondering about that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I'll try to keep it Zoom related as much as we can. But I do think, so we're just being intentional about acknowledging that the people in the room are not just visitors because we happen to not be meeting in our current space, that we are now talking about this is our worship space. And so just having that kind of cultural vernacular shift, that this isn't, there's no more until or during this time, or the kind of language that's starting to put some immediacy towards the end of this experience. Yeah. And so that's one thing, is just trying to reframe how we talk about it. The other piece is we're being very intentional, as we all should be, but we're not usually, about welcoming new people well. So I'm not calling on people to introduce themselves, but we're inviting folks to go ahead and introduce themselves in the chat room. It's such a less intimidating experience, right? Hopefully we no longer kind of point out the brand new person in the room and make them stand up in front of all these strangers and say hello. But now we can just say, hey, we'd love to know if you're visiting from somewhere, put your name in the chat room and introduce yourself. And we have 2 greeters every Sunday who their main job, as soon as people get into the waiting room, is to start interacting with people. So their job is to make people feel welcome as they're coming into the space. And so they're just welcoming people while they're waiting in the waiting room. And then once they come in, they're interacting with people to just welcome them. So when people do introduce themselves, we say, hey, that's great. And then we're really encouraging people to stay for coffee hour. Even so, we're lowering the expectation of coffee hour. I'm not saying there's going to be reflection questions. There's going to be anything. What we're saying is this is just kind of like when you bump into people at the end of worship as you're leaving. We just want to check in a little bit closer and have a few more conversations together. So come on over. I'm going to put you in a room. You have to hit join, and we'd welcome, So we're trying to create an atmosphere that shifts a little bit with visitors now, because it's not as intimidating to introduce yourself now. So those are some of the things we're trying to do. We have some program pieces that we're beginning to think about as well. Thank you, Beth. All right. Leslie Ann, you are requested to unmute.
Oh, okay. Everything went well on Sunday, and we had
Can you
our
just
first...
introduce yourself again real quick?
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Shout out to Ray Beacon, by the way. Leslie Ann Bronstein, interim pastor at Warner Memorial Presbyterian Church.
It's not a good sign. We have to be like, where am I again?
Where am I? Well, I was interim at Fairlington Presbyterian Church at one time in my life, so I'm kind of thrown off when I see Ray. I want to go back. Anyway, everything went well. We had our first congregational meeting.
Okay.
The irony of it is that you have to have an amendment to the bylaws to allow an electronic meeting in order to have an electronic meeting. But we did it. And everything went surprisingly well. It was over we had 2 parts, and the meeting of the congregation, it was over in 20 minutes. But it does raise a question for me about how we will do this when the PNC presents a candidate, because generally speaking, those votes are done by secret ballot.
Yes. So that has already begun to happen, and it depends.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of, if you actually put that into the Facebook group, there's some Presbytery execs that are helping to have that happen and see how that's going on. So that I've had conversations with multiple people who are shifting calls right now and moving out and all that. So this is I think we've already gone through a cycle of approval of calls and people now starting to leave calls and go to new ones. So it is happening. There are lots of different models. There's a small town. They actually took 3 hours. They said it's going to be a 3-hour process, and they just drove around and picked everybody's ballot up. Now that obviously can't happen in a lot of towns, but if you're in a small town and it's a small congregation, you can probably do that. And so that's one thing that I do know happened. I don't know how they're handling the rest of it, but I know it's happened in multiple presbyteries already.
Okay.
So they figured out ways to do it. Great.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Brent.
Hey, Bruce. Thanks. Brent Pratt Keys. I am a temporary pastor, covenant pastor for 2 very small congregations, both of which have decided to close. And there's no guidance whatsoever, at least in our presbytery or in the Book of Order, on how to do that. So that's something in itself. A quick question, Bruce, you said you ask your visitors to put your name in the chat room. I'm not sure I follow that.
No, I just asked them to go ahead and introduce themselves if they like. Tell us, if you're visiting with us, we'd love to hear from you. And what happens is somebody says, "Hey, I'm so-and-so visiting from Chattanooga, Tennessee." And people kind of are like, "Hey, welcome." And there's a little bit of thing that goes around. So, and it feels so much less intimidating.
Okay.
Real honestly, because if folks are willing to do that, it's kind of like, oh, I'm going to fill out a little visitor card, but you don't get my information. Right. So it's
right.
So we just invite people to go ahead and introduce themselves, but not I don't ask them to talk or anything like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we had somebody come. One of my churches, for some reason, I didn't have the waiting room on, and somebody came on with just phoning in and just a phone number. So I tried to be very friendly and asked them, "Who is this?" And it turned out to be someone from another congregation of the presbytery, just joining, and he told us his name, and we put the name on there. How do your greeters interact with people in the waiting room?
So you can when you make them a co-host, they can actually chat with people in the waiting room. So they can send a note to people in the waiting room.
So if you're in the waiting room, you can still do chat.
You'll get messages from the church, but I don't believe you can chat back. I think we just are sending messages out to the waiting room that says, "Hey, welcome. We'll be starting in a few minutes." That kind of stuff. Unless somebody knows differently about that, I don't think you chat back or chat privately while you're in the waiting room.
Well, so is there any way that greeters can identify unidentified people coming?
Yeah, so we've
waiting
just
room?
never done that. If it, some folks, if you want to, I know some of the smaller congregations, if there are less folks, I know people are going through that, but we just decided when we're at, 85 to 100 plus people registering in, it's just too much work to try
Right.
to identify every. So we probably have 30 people who call in or are unknown or something. So we've left that up to chance, admittedly.
Fair enough.
But I do know, like my mom's church, which is a smaller congregation, they have about 35. They, so they'll get like 3 or 4 people, and they figure out. My mom just asks her folks like, "Hey, any of you recognize this number?" Because it's probably a friend of theirs.
Okay.
And that usually gets rid of a few, and then there's like 1 or 2, and they just make sure. And my mom, those of you that know my mom, like she doesn't play. She's like, if you don't answer, if you don't respond, you're gone. And because she's been bombed multiple times.
Ooh.
So yeah. So
Okay.
hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, George, you're up.
Oh, thank you. So I have a couple of one observation and a couple of questions.
Go ahead and introduce yourself and where you're serving first.
Okay, I'm George Lynch. I live in Rancho Mirage, California, which is in the California desert near Palm Springs, and I'm a member of West Hollywood United Church of Christ, which is in LA. So one of the things that we talked yesterday at length about continuing
Uh-oh.
this, and the fact that things that came up and we want to be able to know how to do it effectively is that once we do go back to in-person worship is incorporating Zoom as part of that, and we use PowerPoint, we have projections, all that kind of thing, but making sure the technology doesn't create a bad experience. And I don't know if anybody is doing workshops around that or something, but that's kind of one of those things we're going to look for.
Yeah, thank you, George. That's a great question. So I will say one of the reasons we chose to wait until the end of the year was because I wanted to put that conversation off and really didn't. People were like, what is this going to look like in a hybrid way? And I'm like, well, it could look like these things. And if you all know me, like I'll have ideas. But the reality is where we are and our community, we're not having full worship by any stretch of the imagination through the end. It's just not. I mean, what's going on here? Our folks are older. None of them want to come back anyway. Lots of reasons, and so I'm pushing that conversation off. That doesn't mean that the conversation isn't happening. So I'm leading a few workshops over the next couple of months in a few presbyteries. One with the Virginia Theological Seminary, their e-formation class around hybridizing church. And so I do have some ideas about what that's going to look like. The main thing is going to be, I think, two. One is you're going to have to upgrade your equipment, and you're going to have dual facing cameras. You're going to have cameras facing kind of in multiple spaces, like so that people who are on Zoom can see people who are in the space. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to have, so it goes back to this. The inertia is going to be for people who are located in the geographical space, that's the center of worship, and that everything should now be driven, and that it's an afterthought, or it's like, oh yes, and we have people online. If we really want this to be hybridized, it has to be that we're all worshiping together. Some of us happen to be here, some of us are here. And so I'm encouraging people to create sacred space that is a visual reminder that we're not alone. So we already have this huge movie screen that we pop out for movies. And so on that movie screen behind me is going to be all the faces. So the screen will be there. And then the table that I'll have, it'll look like a DJ station basically. I'll have my laptop and I'm going to preach and lead as if there's a Zoom group and there's all this, so that there's a reminder constantly that we're not trying to make our physical space look like what it used to be and then share that out. We've now created a new worshiping experience. The second thing that I'm going to lift up that I think is really important is that you have to, between now and the time that you think you're going to come back, if you really want to take advantage, or you really want to say all are involved in this experience, we have to start building relationships between those who are going to be there in person and those who are never going to be there in person, so that it's not us as the leadership saying, hey, remember, we have all these people. It's the folks who are in the room remembering that they now have relationships with folks who are never going to be in that room. So our programmatic trajectory for the next 6 months is to build small groups and build interactions that connect people who are here with people who are not ever going to be here, so that when we eventually start thinking about it, it's not just going to be, oh, my aunt who happens to be coming. It's like, oh, John who lives in wherever, what are we going to do about John? Like, we've now made this connection. What are we going to do? So I want our geographic people to really see the rest of the people as part of the community. If we can't create that by the time we're ready to go hybrid, it's probably not going to work, because the inertia is so strong to just be with the people you know. So it's two things as you're thinking about your hybridizing: visual reminders in sacred space that this is not the center of the world, right? And you've created a real sense of community that people see people who are not part of your geographic kind of presence as truly part of this larger church community now. And I think if we could do those two things, we give ourselves a chance at having a truly hybridized worship community versus a worship experience that we share out. And it's pretty much just one way. So that's where I'm headed with some of the thinking and workshops that I'll be doing over the next couple of months. But again, we've pushed our date out so that we can really think about this a little bit and put some things in place. All right. Is that helpful, George?
Very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Any responses, thoughts? I know some of you are thinking about this, and then Beth, I'll go back to you. So, thoughts? Go ahead and jump in.
Mine was a follow-up to what you were saying.
Go for it. Mm-hmm.
So I've been beginning to think about, what does pastoral care or pastoral leadership look like for people who've been attending my service for, the last 10 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking that, if they had been sitting in the pew, I would have had tea with them.
Mm-hmm.
I clearly would have reached out to them. We haven't made a decision, but we're moving toward making a decision about being hybrid. So I'm just wondering about, that kind of.
So I use a service called Calendly. So some of you have made appointments with me, or for whatever reason, it's Calend. I think it's .ly. You could probably search it and find it. It's Calendly. And
Bruce, can you spell that?
So it's like almost like calendar, CALEND, calend, and then LY, CALENDLY. I think that's right. Somebody, what do you call it? Google check me on that, but I think that's what it is. And what you can do there is, what I'm going to do, and I've waited on this. So when I first started the church, I did a Calendly. So what Calendly is basically a way that you can integrate appointments with your calendar, your Google Calendar, your iCalendar, whatever it's going to be. And then people can just choose. You set days and times and spans of the day and all that. And then people can just go in and click on a time to get to meet with you. And so when I started at this church, I basically saved I think it was 2 full days, like 9 to 8 or something, and said, hey, if anybody wants to have coffee or do anything with me, you pick a date. It'll pop up on my calendar, and there we go. And they could choose phone. I think I did offer Zoom or in person, and they could. And so that was what we'll do. And we're going to do that now again, and share that with our folks and say, hey, if you just want to have a chat, here's a 30-minute Calendly link. And so it just integrates into my calendar. And Calendly looks at what you already have planned. You can set buffers so you don't have meetings that, you always have a half an hour break or all that kind of stuff. But it's a way that you can offer the same exact thing. And it's so much easier and less intimidating than if you go to a visitor and say, hey, let's have coffee. Because right then they're like, it's weird to have coffee with the pastor, that kind of thing. Now I'm going to send this out and say, hey, if you just want to get together, you want to chat, this is for anybody, please feel free. Just grab a link. And it creates a Zoom link automatically, puts it in both your calendars. And then you can connect with people, and it's on their terms. So you're also not playing this back and forth around dates. Like they're picking the date because it matches your calendar, and there you go. So just be prepared that once people figure out that they can meet with you, they probably are going to want to meet with you. So choose your, so like I take no appointments on Friday, for instance. When I set up my Calendly, nobody can ever pick, that's my day. I can do stuff on there if I choose, but nobody can ever have those dates. The rest of the time, I just kind of leave open because at this point, what am I doing? And Saturday and Sunday also. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you can't use Calendly for that. But anyway, so I would use, that's one of the things I've done. Other pastoral responses for folks that you've tried? Anybody? Just jump on in. I think you can just jump on in. Maybe you can't. I'm going to call on John. And I'm going to, where'd John go? John went away.
Hey, I'm here.
Oh, there you go. Go for it.
Hey, good morning, Bruce and everyone. John Bassender Flores. I'm a lay leader at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Studio City in California, neighborhood of LA. I have no comment about Calendly, but that's something I will be investigating. A comment about a learning that I had from this Sunday. We live streamed from Zoom to our Facebook page for the first time this Sunday. And when I went back in and looked at the video, I realized that it's important. We have kind of two people running the service other than the minister. So I do the Zoom part of it, and do the slides and show videos from my hard drive and things like that. And someone else is the host who does the muting and unmuting of people and kind of moderates who the people in the service are. So when I went back and looked at the recording of our Facebook stream, I realized that it's important to have kind of a blank user or a placeholder screen to pin during those transition times or when there's music playing, because I had one speaking role on Sunday, and my video was pinned for the words of welcome. And then after that, I was looking around on my screen, and so my eyes were going all crazy. And that was recorded. So, that's there forever. So just if anyone hasn't tried it already and they're going to do streaming to Facebook Live, have a blank placeholder to put for those downtimes when someone who might've been talking is now going to get coffee or, petting their dog or scratching their nose or whatever.
Great. Thank you. All right, Liz, go for it. Liz. Oh, there you go. You're up. But we don't hear you. Liz. Nope. All right. I'm gonna if we don't hear you and we're not picking up any sound from you, Liz, unfortunately. All right. Other thoughts, questions? Oh, I see you, but for some reason we can't hear you at all, Liz. Nope, still not. Technology. We got, that work? No. All right. Well, you can work on it. If we hear you pop in, that's great. Brent, go for it.
I had this problem on Sunday, and I'm wondering if anybody else did, where after worship, we went to the gallery to chat, and a number of people were showing up on my screen as unmuted, but we couldn't hear them.
I'm seeing faces shaking. Yes, that they also had that problem. I had that problem one time this past week, and they just left and came back in. So that could be one of the things that happened. Anybody have that problem? Figured it out? I mean, we had the person just leave and come back, and that seemed to solve it. We didn't have it happen with anybody during worship this Sunday, though. But okay, all right. I'm gonna try you again, Liz. Go for it.
Can you hear me now?
Well, we can hear you now. Woo! What'd you do?
I don't know. It's a crapshoot with me, Bruce. It's a crapshoot. I'm Liz Canerva. I pastor a church in the greater St. Louis, Missouri area, Glendale Presbyterian. So we're a smaller congregation, and I appreciate this resource that you just shared, the Callan, however you pronounce it. And all of these kinds of conversations are really based on the idea that your whole congregation is somehow online.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering about, maybe it's just a small, but I think every congregation has at least a few members that you've got to somehow maintain meaningful contact with. And I've been struggling to figure out just what is the right amount, and then consistent follow through, and also thinking when Glendale does come back into some sort of in-person kind of worship, which limits us to about 25, 26 people in our sanctuary. I also know that some of those folks who are offline aren't going to be coming back at all because there's going to be no vaccine. So if anyone has some thoughts, what you're doing.
So thank you. I'll share a little bit and then love. So think about folks. I think this is a lot of what people are doing, and I think the more input we have, the better. So we have and traditionally are called deacons. Our church, the church that I'm at now, First Pres, they did away with deacons a ways back. So they now have a thing called the Care and Compassion Ministry Team, which are basically deacons. And they originally thought it was weird because I'm like, this is weird, but it turns out it's really good. So every quarter, they actually walk through the entire directory. Our church is not big. It's 125. I don't even know where we're at. 150 maybe on the rolls. So, I mean, it's not small, but it's not a huge church. And they walk through and they make calls. Those folks are making sure that our people are connected. And we have about 12 people that are zero online in retirement communities and have not been able to kind of make it into any of our things. So they mail everything out, every communication that we have that we share as a newsletter that's important. They print those out and mail them. And they make sure that they call, and they give me a list of people I need to call every Sunday. So I'm not having to even track it. I told them early on, I'm like, I cannot do everything. It would be really helpful if you would just tell me who I need to call every Sunday. And so I call 2 or 3 people, just have a little chat. This is a church that has done a really good job at a visit from the church. Doesn't have to be from the pastor, which I really appreciate. But then there's some like, but the pastor hasn't called me in a while. So we've been on the phone and doing that, which I think has been really touching. Again, we're about a dozen of those people in our congregation that need that kind of really intense work. So that's one of the things that we're doing is our care and compassion team is like their constant thing is okay. But remember, we have Francis, this, one person who's like, we need to make sure that we don't lose this person. I'm like, yes, but we're still moving forward. How do we make sure that we're not like totally just leaving people behind? So that is always in our mind, but not so much that it doesn't allow us to keep moving forward with our technology. So that's kind of how we're handling it. Others would love to hear how other people are handling that piece with folks. Go for it. You can unmute yourself, and I think you can.
Well, since no one's chiming in, I'm wondering, we have a care team as well. We don't have deacons, and we've been doing something a little similar to that. I think I'll add on their plate this idea that, hey, friends, you need to be telling me who to call, so it's not such a random thing on my part.
Yeah.
I'm also wondering about, as a smaller church, we're not really invested in a particular piece of software for tracking these kinds of points of contact and keeping a record of, just making sure Mrs. Jones isn't, missed somehow over the last month. And so if anyone's using a useful tracking piece of software that's not like some of the other things I've explored online, right, with 5,000 different modules and whatever, I would love to hear about that as well.
Our care and compassion team does it like because they're each assigned 10 or 15 people. They just have a chart that says, and it says so-and-so contacted. I mean, it's like these meetings drive me absolutely batty because they're like 3 hours long, and they walk through every single name and make sure that, and which is great. So I don't go to those meetings. I don't need to, but I know that they have tracked our folks. Like they have been able to do that. So that's, and we have, we use, what do we use? Servant Keeper, which has that option, but so I don't like Servant Keeper, but it's just too much. Like you said, it's too many modules, but they just basically, they love just making sure they know who's been contacted when. So pushing it to folks so you're not having to track that is I think if you can do that, that would be awesome. Right. Other folks, do you want to jump in about how you're handling pastoral care or other things for folks?
Yeah, we, Judy Brandon, United Church of Christ Greenwells in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Ours is not necessarily high tech. I created a Excel spreadsheet that lists our 70-ish active families, and we have 10 callers, 10 on the care team. They make an attempt to contact each person on each family every week. And then on Friday, we gather and talk about joys and concerns, brainstorm kinds of things that we might want to do in the future for various families or for situations that come up. And so each of those callers has about 6 or 7 families. And then every 4 or 5 weeks, we switch up the names so that we just rotate who calls those people. So we're really deepening relationships by doing that. And people are getting to know each other a lot better.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Judy. All right. Others, how are you handling this? Anyone else care to share? Yep, MB?
NB, Northwest Ohio, 2 little churches. I'm thinking about trying to find some kind of a one-call sort of a system where I can do a weekly or a couple of times a week, maybe a devotion to everybody, but then something that's specific just to people who are phone-only folks. And that could also, say, encourage them with how easy it is for them to call into Zoom and hear some little tricks and tips. So if anybody knows of a good system like that, that's free or really cheap, I would like to know about that.
So you're talking about being able to send a recorded message via phone that they could call in, or being able to say, hey, we're all on a conference call. It calls everybody right away and you're able to talk to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually, the announcement thing is what I was thinking. Mm-hmm. The other piece, really you can do that with Zoom. I mean, you can't call out to them, but you can, well, anyway, whatever. I mean, you can set things up on the fly in Zoom, but as far as just a call, I guess I'm not looking so much for a conference call solution as more of a me projecting out a message solution.
Right. So one of the services that I use is called Remind. So if any of you have ever used Remind, it was really built for schools and classrooms. If any of you have children that have around children in the last 10 years or so, it's the service that a lot of teachers will use because it's one-way announcements. So it's a good text message. It's a one-way kind of announcement-based one. And I found that to be really helpful. Not as many of our folks are on it as I would like. We maybe have 15 or 20 people on it, but it is, it's not a group text. So folks don't have to worry about it being, it's just and you can send links out. So you can send things out. So you could send a link to maybe a video, but that assumes that people have smartphones. So, I mean, but that's one thing to possibly be able to try, something like a Remind. But if anybody else has any other ones, you can share those in the Facebook group. All right. Oh, Brent, go for it.
I was going to say, in a previous church, I used One Call Now. That was really, really easy, convenient, and cheap. You can do both recorded phone messages and texts and links, but it's a great way to get out info to people who don't have computers.
Great. Thank you.
How do you spell that, Brent? The service, how do you spell it?
One Call Now. Mm-hmm.
That's an O-N-E?
C-A-L-L-N-O-W. Right. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you. All right. So we're at 8:45 now. I'm curious, what are folks doing next? I don't know. We're from all over the country. We're all over the place. I don't know if we have any Canadians with us today, but we may be all over the continent. And I know that some churches are having are thinking about opening up and figuring out what that's going to look like. But also, just as you've now been doing this, some of you are early on, but others of you have been doing this. You may be on your 10th service or something. What are you thinking about next? What are you going to be doing next to kind of keep, because what we don't want to have happen is our Zoom services become calcified and have it just become, this is now what we've always done. Like, and that's going to start happening, and you can laugh about like, well, it's not really what we've always done, but that's now. So we got to keep moving and thinking about how do we kind of keep making room for the Spirit to move. Any ideas? What are you all thinking about doing? It could be liturgically, it could be technologically, anything else? What anybody want to share ideas? What they're thinking about doing? MB, go for it.
I'm looking for ways to do a lot more music. So not necessarily during the service because I don't want to make it super long. So I'm trying to figure out some ways to do check in and do some hymn sings, etc. And that would be, I'm a singer, so it makes it easier for me, but any of your musicians could do that and teach some songs, lead some songs, hymns, whatever. And something that I've just recently found, and we did it at a Presbytery meeting, is I took a text that I love, God of Grace and God of Glory, and I put it with a tune that is super easy to sing. I just had to repeat one line, the Beach Spring tune. Da 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 da. Nope, I don't know what it is. But anyway, but it made people hear the words differently. This is an old school thing. People do that all the time. But there are ways we could do hymns that you couldn't do without an organ. And hear the words differently. Anyway, I'm just looking for ways to bring the music piece in because that's what people are really screaming about is music. So
yeah, great, thank you. Sally, you've had your hand up. Go for it.
Now we're doing some stuff with music. We've already figured out finally how to have our musician record at home, and then I'm embedding that in the PowerPoint that I'm using for worship, so people have we to sing along. What we're hoping to add to that, and we've got one of our techie people working on it, is adding voices to the tune. So we have some short sung responses that we've used traditionally. I'm continuing those to continue the sense of familiarity, but we're adding voices to them so people don't have to feel like they're singing alone at home.
Mm-hmm. Great thing. And Sally, where are you?
I'm sorry. I'm Sally Newcomb at Nashua Presbyterian Church in Nashua, New Hampshire.
Oh, great. Well, welcome. Great. Thank you. All right, Bonnie. Did you have more? Go ahead, Sally. I don't want to cut you off. Sorry.
Well, so the big issue for me right now is I'm in the vulnerable group. I'm in my 70s. I have high blood pressure, asthma. I don't want to be back in the sanctuary, but some of my congregation do. The session has agreed that we won't be back in the sanctuary until, at the earliest, it'll be September, because they finally gave me vacation time and we'll have guest preachers who come in by Zoom. But we're beginning to talk about a hybrid service where I'm not there. And they Zoom me in and put me on the wall. I'm not really comfortable with this, but I'm not sure how else to move forward, because I live with a certain level of hesitancy about being back with my people, because the one time in these past 10 weeks that I got anywhere close to people, we were in a yard, everybody's supposed to be 6 feet apart, we're in our masks, but people couldn't hear me through my mask, so they walked closer to me.
Yes.
And there was just a sense of they wanted to be closer to me, and I don't want to. I don't know if I know I'm in a small group of pastors who are that old, but
No, I don't think you are. I mean, I've been calling our folks in the danger demographic, and they love it. They're like, "Yes, we're in the danger demographic." I don't want to go back. I mean, I was very clear that the way that the connections that I would have, if we start inching into that space in our context, it begins like I become that carrier person, and I'm not willing to do that. But Sally, for you, I think there is some, could be a really interesting opportunity, because if you're zoomed in, they have no choice but to realize that they are not all in the same space together. Right? I mean, so now your other people who are zooming in, you're with them just as much as you are with the people in your sanctuary. So it almost is like that, what I was saying before about this hybrid space, it almost helps to make it even easier for folks to have a visual reminder that not everybody is in that same geographic space who are gathering together at that particular time. So I think there might be some real interesting grace in that. The thing that I would make sure you do is have a nice big screen, which you can get fairly inexpensively these days now, and have a good projector. Because if you're not clear, and like, you just want to make sure that you're gonna look as clear as possible. So just making sure that those two things happen technologically, I think would be important. The other thing is, I think you need to stay away as long as you feel comfortable. I just feel like folks need to honor we have young people at our church who are immune compromised, and so they're not coming back. So I think it's beyond just even age at this point. It's just a lot of people. So thank you, Sai, for that. I want to make sure I get to Bonnie. Go for it, Bonnie.
Hi, I'm Bonnie. I'm in Tinton Falls, New Jersey at Grace Christian Church, and I am not the pastor. I'm actually the director of children's ministry, but I have become the IT person for Zoom Church. So my question about moving forward is, where my pastor is not technological at all and does not like Zoom at all. We've been using it for small groups. We've been using it for Sunday worship. But he wants to move forward at some point with meeting back in the building. So I'm really challenged by this idea of a hybrid service, because I don't know how that would work. And I feel like the people who are choosing to not come to the building, which may be a lot of them, including myself, are going to feel left behind. Mm-hmm. Because Zoom Church will be the second, cousin of the actual service. So I just was throwing that out. To have ideas.
So I thank you. I think that's probably the more common reality than folks who really are going to be able to pull off hybrid church. I mean, I think in all realities, most of our congregations, it takes a lot of work, and if you don't have the support of your pastoral leadership, it makes it even more difficult. So I think there are a couple of questions. One is, do you really have the potential capacity to do a truly hybrid church where everybody feels like they're in the same space? And I think no is a perfectly fine and legitimate answer to that, because that doesn't mean then it's either that or everybody else gets left behind. What it does mean, though, is you're going to give some things up. So how do you make sure you connect with those people that have connected on Zoom? So does it become recording and streaming? Does it become, like, what are some other options besides, because the hybrid thing it's not as if it's going to be easy. I think it's going to take a lot of commitment and work and time. And a pastor can't just drive it. Folks have to be invested in it. So I think saying no to that is, I think most of our churches are going to say no to it either by practice or intentionally. And I would rather have folks say, we just aren't going to be able to pull this off. But that doesn't mean then that there aren't other options. So I think the easiest thing is recording and posting. Like, that is just a very easy thing to do. Just get a decent camera. There's lots of them out there. Record it and post it. And it's not as sexy as a lot of other things that are out there, but that's fine. Like, not everybody. It's not a competition. This is not Zoom Olympics. This is what works for your community in the best way. So figuring out how to translate that, I think, is important. But I do think it is a question that folks have to realize, that the levels of disconnecting from this new community that's being created electronically, you do make choices about the levels of disconnect you're willing to do. So if we say we're no longer going to do Zoom, we know that we will lose 30 people every Sunday. Like, we could decide, well, those are kids who weren't coming before anyway because they're living in other places. Those are new people that moved away. We hadn't seen them anyway. There were 5 or 6 brand new people. We wish they could come, but they're never going to live in Palo Alto. Like, I would rather have us make that choice and know we're doing that, or to say, well, we can still connect, but we're just going to record and post it and try to stay connected with people. Not as great, but that's something. So that's kind of how I would approach it. Is it's not a dichotomy of either or. It's like, let's make sure that if you're going to try this hybrid thing, you all have the capacity to really do it. And then if not, where along that spectrum of technological kind of communication of worship would your church lie? Is that helpful, Bonnie?
Thank you very much.
Good. Other thoughts on that as folks are thinking about what you're doing next?
So we spent 2 hours up here in Joanna up at University Presbyterian Church in Rochester Hills, Michigan. We spent 2 hours going round and round about how to do hybrid, toying with lots of different ideas, including streaming to Facebook and then Facebooking to Zoom, because we have a handful that will not be on Facebook and we have a handful that will not be on Zoom. So instead of going Zoom to Facebook, we're trying to toy with Facebook to Zoom and what that looks like. Or do we do what Bruce says and just say, sorry, we're out, we're going to make a decision. And I think there's 3 of us that are trying to make that decision along with our session, but we give a strong recommendation. And it's a hard decision. And so we're trying lots of different ways. So think outside the box, like we had to get to here, and go one more step outside the box, but be comfortable of who you are and who your community is.
Yeah.
But I also know that Barbara has chimed in wanting to talk about music.
Okay.
Yes, this is Barbara Raymacky. I'm from Westminster Presbyterian in West Hartford, Connecticut.
Welcome.
And I am the musician at our church. So we don't use Zoom right now. We record our service and do it on Vimeo, I think it is. But one of the things I've been doing on Zoom with our choir is having a virtual choir rehearsal on Zoom. And because we don't know right now how to plan for an anthem, and teaching an anthem on Zoom is very, very difficult because you can't hear people singing. I mean, I mute everyone because unmuted, it's cacophony.
And not in a good way.
Not in a good way. So I've been doing a discovery tour through our hymn book, Glory to God, and picking out hymns in like a section of Pentecost, Ascension, et cetera, the church, that we never get a chance to sing. And I am introducing the choir to different hymns from different cultures with different rhythms, from different composers, et cetera, and doing a little background history on that. And then we sing it. We might sing like 2 verses and then go on to another one. But I'm also thinking about offering a Zoom hymn sing. And the same thing, people get intimidated if they think other people are going to hear them singing, And so my pitch is going to be, this is a very safe way to do it because you will be muted. You will sing to yourself or whoever is in the room for you. But I'm going to ask them to send me 3 of their top hymns, favorite hymns. And then I will do some background work and try to give them like a background of why the hymn was written or who wrote it type thing. And then have them unmute themselves, or I will unmute them and ask them, why does this hymn speak to you? And so try to make it kind of interactive that way.
That's great. Thank you, Barbara. Yeah, and I think I've heard of a lot of choir music directors. So ours is doing music school. So every week, so he's teaching some music theory, doing some other stuff. Every week it's a different topic.
Yeah.
So let me ask a question for you musician folks that are on here. Is there anything like this for musicians and music folks in your church? Like a Zoom gathering at all? It feels like that seems like a natural thing to have where everybody gets together, break out into some small groups and share ideas and commiserate and then come back. Does anybody know of anything going on? I'm not seeing any.
Not in our place.
All right. Well, that's going to happen. We're gonna make that happen out of Zoom Faith. I may be in touch with some of you, and it won't be weekly or anything like that. But I think there should be a space for people to share like what they're doing and trying, especially as folks are kind of in this for a lot longer. All right, we're going to do it. So tell your music people that we are going to do something, and you'll see a note from me. We'll plan that. I can always organize, plan, and moderate things. I don't have any expertise in music, but we'll grab some folks if you're interested, and we can figure out some way to do that and share some resources. That feels like a no-brainer to me. All right, we are at the end of our time. Oh my goodness, these hours go so quickly. Again, I do enjoy hanging out with you on Monday morning. I do. Not enough to do it every week for the perpetual future. So we are now every other week. And so I updated the Zoom registration. So you should have got some kind of announcement. So all the things are on there. You can add that to your calendar. Again, barring major scientific developments, I'm here and we're not rushing around and going places. So we'll just kind of keep doing this. So in 2 weeks, we will meet again. Go ahead and continue to ask questions over on the Facebook group, and continue to be generous with your collegiality and your expertise. I so appreciate what you all are doing. So until 2 weeks from now, we will see you on the interwebs. Bye, all.
We all appreciate you too, Bruce.
Oh, you're very welcome. Very welcome.
Thanks, Bruce.